Welcome to the Digital Identity Digest, the audio companion to the blog at Spherical Cow Consulting. I'm Heather Flanagan, and every week I break down interesting topics in the field of digital identity, from credentials and standards to browser weirdness and policy twists. If you work with digital identity but don't have time to follow every specification or hype cycle, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. I'm not going to talk about AI this episode. I'm sure that'll be a relief to some of you. What I am going to talk about is wallets. Now, I have spent more time than is probably healthy listening to conversations about digital identity wallets. That may not sound like a confession, but it probably is, right? I mean, they're interesting conversations. Sometimes they are smart, sometimes they're political, sometimes they're oddly emotional for a topic involving standards, documents, and mobile apps, but they also tend to circle the same confusion over and over again. And that's that people, even technologists, blur the line between the wallet and the verifiable digital credentials inside the wallet. Like I said, even in technical circles, these two ideas are often treated as interchangeable. They're kind of not, right? A wallet is a container, it's an interface, it's a mediator, it's a control point. A credential is the thing asserting something about you or another subject, like your license, your proof of age, your employee status, some kind of attestation. These pieces are related, of course, but they're solving different problems. And when you collapse them into one concept, I think we end up debating, the wrong things. We're funding the wrong priorities, and we're oversimplifying what adoption actually requires. I've written about this before in earlier posts on wallet metaphors and the politics surrounding wallet standards, and I'd rather hoped that the market would become a little bit more precise with time. It hasn't, at least not yet. But that said, right, for years, wallet discussions lived in the comfortable zone of, well, this is interesting, but maybe later, right? Standards groups debated architectures, vendors ran pilots, conference panels promised transformation on a conveniently distant timeline. It was all fairly tidy, and if something did not work, there was always another workshop next quarter. That said, I think that phase is kind of ending now, right? For consumers and citizens, it's done. It's already ended. For businesses, it's getting closer than I think many seem to realize. Governments around the world are now putting real weight behind digital wallets and the credentials that live in them. The European Union has made wallets central to its eIDAS 2.0 agenda. Australia continues its digital ID efforts. Mobile credentials are expanding in multiple jurisdictions. Age assurance laws are adding fresh pressure to getting all of this done, right? Often with the hopeful assumption that reusable digital credentials will somehow solve age assurance in a nice, neat, and tidy manner. I wrote about that too. I don't think they will, but neither here nor there. So now whether any or all of those programs succeed is actually kind of secondary. The point is that the momentum is there now, and the wallets and their credentials are becoming part of public infrastructure and regulated market requirements, right? Once that happens, these systems tend to persist in some form, even if the first versions are awkward, fragmented, or less magical than advertised. So yeah, wallets and their credentials are here to stay, which brings us to the obvious question. If these things are now inevitable, then is the remaining work just about rolling them out? Is it just go ahead and build the apps, connect issuers, add relying parties, educate users, scale the operations, and you're done? Wouldn't that be lovely? It would be lovely, but that's not where we are. I don't think we're even close to there, to be honest. One of the stranger features of this market is how often people talk as though deployment is beginning on top of a nice settled foundation of standards, and it really isn't, right? Let's take the World Wide Web Consortium's digital credential API work, of which I'm a huge fan since I'm the working group chair for that one, co-chair. There are still meaningful open questions, including like how browsers or other user agents should handle requests that may need to interact with more than one wallet, right? Which sounds pretty niche until you think about what that would mean in practice. If several wallets can satisfy a request, who decides which one is used? How much does the website learn? How much should the browser mediate? How do you preserve privacy, avoiding steering users into preferred products and still keep the experience understandable for normal human beings who do not spend their evenings reading standards issues? These are not edge cases, right? They go directly into competition, usability, and control. And at the same time, very smart people are trying to reduce the whole fragmentation between some major ecosystems here. You've got the ISO, IEC, MDOC approaches that many of you are familiar from mobile driver's licenses, right? Those underpin many government credential deployments. But you've also got the OpenID foundations, OpenID for VC, family of specifications for issuance and presentation. The hope is sensible enough that they want to, harmonize these things, merge them in a way, and not end up with a third specification, which has been created mostly out of collective frustration and instead replaces the previous two. It's a very worthy goal. It's also very difficult, right? The systems emerged from different assumptions, governance cultures, and deployment priorities. Some grew out of government use cases, others grew out of internet federation and protocol traditions. Those histories do matter. So it's not really just engineering, it's more like diplomacy with packet captures and trying to figure out how it all is supposed to work. Right? But wait, there's more. Selective disclosure and zero knowledge proof approaches they're a big part of why is there so much hot press around wallet and digital credentials and the fact that they can be amazing, right? The selective disclosure, zero knowledge proofs, they're a very elegant answer to the questions of privacy and other regulated questions. And, that's great. There are use cases where proving only what is necessary while revealing less underlying data is exactly the right direction, deserves serious credit. But that elegant cryptography does not automatically become elegant infrastructure because at scale, these approaches can introduce lifecycle complexities, revocation challenges, verifier burdens, performance overhead, so much performance overhead, compatibility questions, and just a user experience friction. So the math may be lovely, but the operational team may be less enthusiastic about how all of this is going to roll out. I wrote about that too a couple weeks ago. So, alas, this is a fairly recurring pattern in technology. A design can be technically sound and still painful to actually use. And the gap between the whiteboard success and production success deserves a lot more attention than it's really getting. Now, beyond regulated use cases or, government credentials, many enterprise wallet discussions still feel a little bit like solutions looking for problems, right? A company of any scale probably already operates its own single sign-on, its own federation, lifecycle management, device management, fraud tooling, all those things. So, they turn around and say, why would we rebuild this? That's not a resistance to innovation. It's basic governance and a query about the return on investment, right? And there may be some strong answers in some sectors. Portable attestations could reduce onboarding friction when you're hiring a new employee. Better credential reuse could lower fraud or data retention burdens, and cross-organizational trust models can make things ever so much more efficient. All of that is possible. But, the wallets are coming is not a business case. No chief financial officer has ever approved a major migration because the keynote was particularly compelling. At least I hope not. If that happened in your organization, I suggest you find another organization to work at. In any case, for everyday consumer use, much of the wallet and credential experience will likely be shaped by the major platform providers such as Apple, Google, Samsung, along with browsers and their operating systems. And that really matters, right? It means that decisions about supported credentials, default flows, API access, portability, and competitive participation may be driven less by abstract market choices and more by the platform policies. So when people say users will choose their wallet, we should at least pause long enough to ask, well, how much choice will actually exist? I mean, users may choose among options, or they might choose among options someone else has already now narrowed down for them, such as their platform provider. Those are very different things. The regulation, Europe is a really interesting case right now. It's an awkward timing issue. Governments have increasingly mandated outcomes, that digital wallets should exist, credentials should work, trust should be portable, privacy should be protected, very reasonable ambitions. But there are still substantial open questions about how do you certify a wallet as safe enough for broad reliance? secure storage, tamper resistance, privacy controls, update models, interoperability testing. These aren't decorative details that you add to the end. They're the foundations of how anyone's going to be able to trust this stuff. And the work is underway through European cybersecurity certification efforts to make it clear, but that work is still relatively early, which is a problem. It's why expecting a fully mature, consistently certified rollout across EU member states on the aggressive political timeline is a really very optimistic goal. Now, some member states will attempt to move quickly, some will move partially, some will declare success while still resolving fundamentals, some will discover that cross-border interoperability is easier in a press release than it is in production. I mean, that's just how these large infrastructure programs continue to work. So, great, fine. What about the poor users? The users don't wake up in the morning saying, I really want a wallet, a digital wallet to hold my credentials, right? That's not what they care about. What they want is they want to be able to prove their age quickly so they can buy beer. They want to rent a car smoothly. They want to access a service easily. They want to get onboarded faster, right? They want to do something or have something, which means the winner in this market may not be the organizations with the most impressive wallet branding. They may be the ones that make the credentials useful with the least amount of friction involved, which is probably pretty obvious, but it seems to be pretty rare. So, yep, wallets are here, absolutely. But the story is definitely not over. I wouldn't say the environment is stable yet. I think we're entering a phase where the incentives, the governments, the certification, the migration cost, all those matter a lot more than the demos or the conference slides that you might be seeing at the events coming up this year. As always, real systems are pretty messy. And if you are working on some deadlines that may not be realistic based on what is actually available today, you are not alone. This is a thing. All I can say is keep watching out and just try and build in flexibility as much as you can into your environment, because you may be required to implement something today and you may find you have to change it tomorrow. That's the way the wallet world and digital credential world is going to work for at least another couple of years. Good luck. Bon chance. Hope to see you at an event soon. And that's it for this week's episode of the Digital Identity Digest. If it helps make things a little clearer, or at least a little more interesting, share it with a friend or colleague and connect with me on LinkedIn at HL Flanagan. And if you enjoyed the show, do be sure to subscribe and leave me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find the written full post at sphericalcowconsulting.com. Now stay curious, stay engaged, and let's get these conversations going.